The agenda is to start off I'll show you a couple slides. We're not going to spend a lot of time filling them in around sort of what's happening with professional development in Washington. And then we're going to hear from Elizabeth some on a little bit of background on the NAAA options around certification. I'll briefly touch on the idea of micro-certification, and then we'll go into groups to discuss them. So thank you for putting your names in that first page. Let's go ahead and go to the second page, Hannah. So as you're hanging out, we would love to hear from you at some point. What topics do you really, when you think about professional development, what would you personally want to attend? How would you want it offered? What topics do you feel as a state we would really benefit from attending? And then we're asking you to think about, offer your thoughts around where do you actually get professional development? I put in a few things that just were popping in my head, so I would start to populate it. But where is it showing up in terms of standalone workshops, employer training, grad programs, conferences? Are there other topic areas we're not mentioning? And this is all part of us as the convenings committee learning, right? We want to be learning from our members. We want your input, your thoughts, as far as both pages go, around what it is you'd really be looking for, and where do you currently get it, so that we can help think about how to best then support that. So while people are having a chance to fill that in, Elizabeth, do you want to go ahead and talk about how informal educators, no, excuse me, about the NAAA certification?
So again, E3 Washington is the state affiliate of the North American Association for Environmental Education. We have one in Idaho as well, I think, maybe not quite as active as this one currently. Alaska, Oregon, California, all across the country. And several state affiliates offer environmental educator certifications. And so that looks different in different states. Some offer in-person cohort-based trainings. Some offer a hybrid where people get together in person for some and do some individualized learning, asynchronous learning, online learning, and some offer entirely online-based courses like Colorado. Some states have accredited their programs through the North American Association for Environmental Education. So these accredited programs are based specifically on the guidelines for excellence in environmental education. One of those sets of guidelines is focused around professional development for environmental educators. There are 6 of them total, and we actually are offering a training with the guidelines director, Dr. Boris Simmons, later in this conference. Those guidelines for community engagement training, November 15th from 1 to 2. So there is more information on the NAAA website where you can learn more background about these programs. Many states also offer certification programs that are not accredited by NAAA. They may still be based on those competencies, but they might not meet the level of rigor or have all of the pieces in place to become accredited. One piece I struggled with when I accredited the Kentucky program was around guaranteeing sustainability, longevity of the program. They want you to be able to demonstrate that you have the sustainability, the financial and organizational capacity and sustainability to have a long-term program. So that's just an example of what you can get through an accredited program. And then to wrap up, the accredited programs do have the ability to offer across state boundary certification. So if Washington had an accredited program and you got accredited here and you moved to another state with an accredited program, that certification would transfer. Lastly, I went through a cohort-based program in Kentucky as a participant, and I formed lifelong mentorships and personal connections with colleagues that have carried me through to this day, even in my move across the country.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. The reason I don't know if we gave all of this framing, the reason we wanted to put that forward is because that's one thing we are considering this year within the convenience committee. We're in that stage of like, well, what do we want to do? How do we want to support professional development? And that's one possibility. We could work towards becoming accredited, offer informal education educators, environmental educators, I should say, across our state an opportunity to get that stamp to be accredited or as a, excuse me, not accredited, but certificated as an educator. There are also micro certification programs occurring that's kind of becoming a thing in the world right now. I'm not an expert on that, but that's the idea of like individual workshops and courses get like badges that represent certification in various ways, that then are kept track of within one location. That's something then one could point to in a resume or just, be sort of like, okay, I've done these pieces and I'd like to fill in these pieces. And that's that idea of micro certification. And of course, there's professional development as a whole. Like I go to plenty of workshops, gain that personal learning, and I'm not getting any sort of certification for it, but I still get that growth. So there's various ways in which we can be thinking about this and think about supporting this. We're asking you to think about how can E3 best support this in the coming year. What would you want us to be really pushing forward on? Is there an initiative like the certification? Would there be a value in that? Micro certification, workshops, coming together in additional conferences. What would that look like? And then we also would love it if you think some about the demand and interest side. Do you see, when we think about certifications, does that feel like value personally or professionally? If you're an employer, is that something you would start to take notice of if that got built? There's a little bit of chicken and egg with certification, right? No one values it until it exists. Once it exists, will they value it? Would it fill a need? Whatever you're proposing. And then there's this idea of would you pay for it? Would organizations pay for it? What does that look like as far as funding it? We can seek grants, of course, but is there also a potential revenue to pay for that work? Cool. Thank you all, and glad you could join us today.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.